Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. My name is Joseph, and today I'm going to be going over the Q&A questions for the weekly number 1. This is in my studio school community, so if you want to ask some questions, go ahead and join there, and then just respond to the weekly post with your questions. So the first question is from Michael. He says he's looking for a way to quickly change text. Yeah, I know exactly kind of what he's talking about. So I'm just going to make a kind of basic rectangle here just to draw on, and I'm going to give it something that's easy to remember. So it's going to be 100 millimeters wide, and let's just do like 50 millimeters tall. And then finish sketch, and I'm just going to make just a little rectangle here, rectangular prism. And now we're going to make a sketch for the text. So the way I do my text box is you go to create text, and then I just draw the text box without making it coincident. And then I'm going to just give it a sample, let's say like test. And what I'm going to do here is a little counterintuitive, I guess, but I'm going to make the height 100 millimeters because it's talking about the height here, but it roughly corresponds to the width as well. So you can't really control the width of the letters directly. So I just kind of use that as a corollary. And then I'm going to divide this by however many letters we have. So there's 4 letters. I'm just going to say 100 divided by 4. And you can see that this gets pretty close to being within our 100 millimeter area that we're looking at. So you can also just go up, or you can use maybe like 4.5. And so now that's pretty much within the width we want. I use a character spacing of 5, so yours might be set to 0, but I'd recommend changing it to 5. And your alignment might also be different, so just do center and middle, and I'm going to click OK. And then now I'm just going to go ahead and constrain all these points to the different corners here, just so that everything is kind of centered up. And you can constrain this just like anything else. You don't have to use the edges, but this is just for demonstration purposes. So now finish sketch, extrude, and then I want to just select the text, and we're just going to cut it out a little bit. Okay, so now let's go ahead and change the colors. So now you can see we have our test text in the part. So the question was, how can you change this quickly? So one tip is just to name your sketch text, and I would recommend just leaving just text in the sketch. It's okay to have multiple sketches. And then if you want to edit it, you just right click, edit sketch, and then double click, and now you can change this to something else. So let's make it like January, like something long. And so now obviously your text is outside of your box. And the way, again, I'm recommending to do this is basically just count your letters 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So if we change this to 7.5, now it's almost inside. So it might be better just to go ahead and go one up, because it probably depends on what font you're using and things like that, how close the height is to the width. If it's more square, obviously that'd be pretty close. But that's just one way that I thought of that you could do it. There's also this plugin, which I'm going to pause the video real quick and jump to that. All right, so this is the plugin that I found. It has a lot of good reviews, and it sounds like this is pretty promising. So I would definitely look into this. I would personally be demonstrating it myself, but unfortunately I'm having some issues with my plugins on Fusion for some reason. So I think that this is probably what you should do, is to look into this and see, if this would basically do what you need it to do. So I have a feeling that this is the best solution, because it sounds like, parametric text is exactly what you want, to be able to change the text and update the size automatically. So that would be my recommendation, if possible, is to try out this plugin. And so if you have the plugin installed, it would be here, add-ins, script and add-ins, and then you could use the plugin. But again, as I mentioned before, mine is just like basically not working correctly. So I'm working with Autodesk to get that fixed. But anyway, that's the 2 things I came up with. Is one, you can either, just divide, like I said, by whatever roughly the number of characters you have, or use that plugin, I think are the best options. You can't actually make a parameter into text. I've tried to do that a bunch of different ways. I've read on forums. So if you, made a parameter and you change the unit to unitless, if you use text, it doesn't work. If you use double quotes, it doesn't work. If you use single quotes, also doesn't work. So anyway, I don't think that there's a good solution for that other than maybe that plugin. So hopefully that's a little helpful. If not, that's the best I got. All right. The next question is from Elizabeth. She is asking about making these planner type things. And so this is a little more complicated thing to do, but I think I have a pretty good concept of what we need to do. All right, so I started up a new design, and let's start off by making parameters. So there's gonna be a lot of parameters in this file just because there's a lot of things you need to calculate to make things look right, and it's easier just to use parameters. But benefit to that is if you have Fusion, you can get the files for free in the community and just modify the parameters, and everything should update correctly. So go to modify, change parameters, and now we're gonna add our parameters here. So the first one we're going to use is diameter, and let's just make that 100. Click OK, and then we can go ahead and just do height as well. Let's make that 200. Click OK, and then let's do circumference, and then this is going to be calculations. We're going to say diameter times pi. And you have to have pi all capitalized. And so 100 times 3.14 is 314. So that's correct. And then we need to make another one. It's going to be hex number. And this is going to be no units because it's just like a quantity. And so we're going to make 10, and you can change this to whatever you want. And then we're going to make another one. It's going to be based off hex number. This is going to be hex size. This is going to be millimeters again. And we're going to say circumference. And then divided by hex number plus 1. And I'll try to explain this as we go through it, but basically we want the hex to be slightly smaller so that we have spacing in between each hex. So this is going to be how much space we have, or this is going to help us figure out how much space we can use between each one. And then for spacing, we're going to make that a parameter as well. So spacing, leave that as millimeters, and that's going to be hex size, which we just did, plus parentheses hex size divided by hex number. All right, and so that should be all that we need to do. And again, to make sure everyone understands, this is just the size of the hexagon, and the spacing is going to be how much space we have between each one so that we have the rib in between. Because if you didn't have any space, there would be no rib. So hopefully that all makes sense. I'll try to explain it as we go. So now we're going to create sketch. I'll just use the top here, make a circle, and then our diameter here is going to be diameter, which is 100. Finish sketch. Now we're going to extrude. So click E, and we're going to extrude by height, which is 200. Click enter. Okay, now we're going to make a new. Actually, let's go ahead and shell everything out. So shell here, make it 2. You could also make that a parameter if you wanted to. Create sketch here on the side, and then let's just project the edge of this out. And so this is where we're going to use some of our parameters. So we're basically just going to make a sketch, a rectangle, the length of our circumference. And what we're trying to do is just wrap this around. So we're going to extrude, but it's actually going to be an embossing feature where we make our pattern, and then it's just going to wrap all the way around our cylinder. So then we're going to use coincident and make that coincident, and then D for dimension. And then this is going to be circumference. And so now we have our circumference, and now we just need to draw our shape. So create polygon, circumscribe polygon, and you can just draw it kind of like that. Collinear, make that collinear here. And then we're going to dimension our width here, and that's going to be hex size, which we already calculated, so that should be pretty easy. And then from here to here, you can do really whatever you want on the first one. I'm just going to make them all kind of consistent. So this is going to be hex. Actually, it's going to be spacing divided by, actually, I got another idea. Let's put this in the middle, and that way everything will be kind of symmetric, top and bottom. So we can just make this come across here, midpoint. All right, so now we have right here for our pattern, and then make that into a construction line. Finish sketch, and then create pattern, rectangular pattern, and then we're going to make this into feature. Oops, actually we have to go back into the sketch. Same thing, rectangular pattern, and then we're gonna select this polygon, that. All right, and then our directions are gonna be here and here. So we can go ahead and kind of drag that a little bit. And now this is where we're gonna use our spacing. So we leave this on spacing, we make this into spacing, and then we make this into spacing. And so here in a second, what we should see here, this is going to be hex number. Oops. This is hex number. And so what you should see is that this works out to almost the exact right number here. So if you wrapped it all the way around, this would be symmetric. So that's kind of the thing that makes this challenging, is because you have to figure out, based on the circumference, your spacing. So that's really the hardest part of this whole situation. So once you have that done, really you can make the quantity as many as you need. That's just to show that that's why we did that calculation, is to make sure that this value is the same all the way across, so that everything looks and aligns evenly. So the quantity, again, we can kind of play around with that to make sure everything gets covered. And usually I do symmetric on most of these. So this one, we're going to have to just go up on the quantity. Don't change the spacing, but the quantity needs to go up. It has to cover everything. So I think that's probably about what we need to do. Okay, and then we click OK. Have to buffer for a second because it's a pretty big computation. Let's see, okay. And so now we click Finish Sketch. And so the next step is to create and then do Emboss. And now we're actually gonna have to do this in 2 steps because it creates an error, but let's just go ahead and select pretty much all of these hexagons. I would probably leave this bottom row just because if you want a floor to the design. So I would just skip over those, but just have to select all these. There's probably a better way to do this, but just gonna select them, but leave this last row, because if you select it, it's gonna give you an error, and I don't know a way to get around that other than just doing it twice, essentially. Okay, and then our face is gonna be this cylinder, and what we want to do is we want to cut. And you can do more than 2 millimeters, but since it's only 2 millimeters thick, that should work fine. Click OK. And so now we have our design. And the last thing we want to do, actually we skip some there, so let's edit that. And obviously you can do this however you think looks the best. So we missed these, and that was because of that error. So essentially you just need to redo the same thing again, just for those ones that we didn't do, which were the ones on the far right here. So we're going to do the same thing, create, and then emboss here, and then select those surfaces, make sure you cut them, and then click OK. And then hide the sketch, and now we have our part. So this file will be available for free if you just want to change it. So we should be able, the only thing that's going to have to change would be the quantity of the pattern you make so that it covers everything, but you should be able to update this and it kind of update correctly. So hopefully that makes sense. I know it's kind of wandering and meandering tutorial on this, but it is a fairly complicated thing to do in Fusion. There's other software that does it fairly easily, but that is that design. We might as well make it a different color. Okay, so that was another question I had. And then the last question, let's see. So the solid and surface modeling, there's actually a question that kind of goes along with this, Jeremy, that wasn't in this comments list that I'll get to here in a second. But yeah, this was one of those questions that has to do with surfaces. So this person says, Heather says, new to Fusion, stuck on making this belt buckle. And I've actually tried to make something kind of similar to this before, and it is somewhat difficult in Fusion. So there's actually a lot of different ways to do it. There's a couple ways that are kind of cheating, and there's a couple ways to do it the right way that Fusion just isn't very good at, so I'll go through a couple of them. So really the right way to do this would be in the Surface tab, which I'm not a huge fan of, I'm not very good at, so just take all this with a grain of salt, but I'm going to try to show just the general process for doing it in surfaces. So the first thing that you want to do is just to make your basic kind of profile or your flat profile shape, and you do this in as few splines as possible. So you want to do this very carefully, I guess, if possible. And so that's kind of the rough shape, obviously not perfect. And then I'm going to use this line just as a symmetry line. So I'm going to make this into a construction line. And then we're going to just make everything symmetric. And I was careful to make sure that I had the same number of control points on each side of the line, because I'm going to make all these symmetric, or try to. So symmetric, that, and that. Come on, symmetry. Yeah, there we go. So basically we want to make all these points symmetric. It's going to look funny for a little while. That. Okay, so now they're all symmetric. So now when I change this, they kind of change together. So you should be able to make your general shape fairly easily now. And so again, as few control points as possible is important. And so, I mean, this isn't perfect like a belt buckle, but I think that that's, close enough, hopefully, to get the point across. And you can obviously change it however you want. You can change these to kind of correspond with that. One thing to note though here is that those aren't symmetric. So I guess we would have to make that symmetric as well, which again is part of why all this is kind of difficult. It might be easier just to, dimension them and things like that. But essentially, you want to try to make both of these as close to the exact same as possible. And unfortunately, it's pretty difficult to mirror the pieces or the sides across because of the method that we're using. But anyway, so we have the general shape. And now we're going to make a couple of profiles, kind of like you did with the loft. So again, you might have already done this, but just do profile there. Make sure you don't connect this, because I did that and it gives this method a little bit of issues when you do it that way. Okay, finish sketch. And now we're going to make another plane kind of over here. And you're basically just trying to make a guide for the surface that we're going to make here in a little while. So another plane, let's do offset, do one there, and then we need another plane maybe here. I'd like to have a plane this way if possible. So plane at an angle. I'm just trying to make one that would intersect kind of that way. Here we go. Maybe something like that. I'm just kind of eyeballing that, and then make another offset plane from here where it would kind of intersect in that curve a little bit. Okay, and so we're going to do the same thing again. Create sketch here. And the way that I project these is create, project, and then do the intersect. And then you can see these dots show up. So that's what you want. And then just going to use spline to make the arc, and then click OK. And then you can always come and modify this later, but just trying to make just a rough kind of profile. And if you want to make that taller, you can go in and edit those later. So now we have two. Make another one here. Same thing again. Create, intersect. We should see our two little intersection dots. And then we're going to make that a little bit lower, knowing we can come back and change it. And then the last one here, kind of towards the end, is going to be the lowest. Create, intersect, and then make that really low to the ground. All right, and now I would like to just mirror those, but I'm not sure if it's going to work or not. So mirror. I don't know if I'm going to be able to do it. Mirror. Yeah, I don't think that I'm going to be able to mirror this. So I'm just going to go ahead and move forward with this and just show you. Basically, you want to do the same thing on the other side. So you'd have to make sure that all these are constrained, and that's going to be somewhat difficult to constrain everything. But this also gives you a good idea of kind of what it can do. So now we're going to go over to Surface and click on Patch. And so essentially what Patch is going to try and do, which this may or may not work great, but this is going to guide the profile. So you just select the bottom as your main profile. And then for the rails, you want to select these. All right, so here we go. Patch, select the profile, and then the rail. So we're going to select that. And so you can see now that this surface is kind of up off the ground. And so hopefully it's going to keep doing this. And so I accidentally forgot to select rail. I selected another edge, which is not what I want. So see if I can start again. This is why it's kind of frustrating to work with. And again, I'm not an expert at this, but it should work. So again, boundary edge is here. And just make sure you reselect this each time. So here, come back, reselect, here, reselect, here, reselect, here. Well, so that's the issue, is this one. So we're gonna have to modify it a little bit. And it doesn't really help you on like why it's not working. So you kind of have to just guess essentially, which is part of why this is just not the best experience, just quite honestly. All right, let's see if it'll work now. There, reselect, here, reselect, here, reselect. Okay. And so I think you can kind of get the idea now of how this works. So you can adjust this too, so you can make it kind of more or less pronounced just by modifying the sketches. So if you make them all active, it will break, but you can make a pretty smooth profile, right? And so I didn't spend a ton of time on smoothing all these out, but this is kind of the general concept. It does sometimes kind of get out of, like you could see there, where it was trying to fit it kind of weirdly, but I think this could work for you for what you're trying to do. I'm going to show you a couple other ways that are a little bit quicker and might get you where you want to go as well. So this again, so see that kind of will get out of hand quickly. I think the part of the reason is I didn't do the other side. So, but you can see the other side is pretty, nice and smooth. So maybe that's kind of what you want to go for. So the next thing would be to essentially patch everything. So this is also another thing that sometimes it doesn't quite do very well. So see how it's throwing errors, and that's just part of working with Fusion, especially in this scenario. So if someone knows a better way to do this, then I'm all ears. But this is kind of the way that I know of to make that nice smooth shape in surfaces. And there's a way to patch and then convert to a solid body, which would be the next step. So that is one way, and now I'm going to show you some easier kind of not quite so, I guess, textbook ways of doing it. So the next one would be using a loft, kind of probably similar to what you did initially. So I'm actually going to come back here and see if I can just duplicate. So I'm going to go back, instead of doing this sweep, I'm going to go back, or doing this surface, I'm going to go back and just create a new component from that same sketch. So this is going to be the loft version. And let's see if I can use that. Okay, so this was our original sketch. I'm just going to go ahead and project that out. This is from last time. So a new sketch. All right, and so now we have the same sketch as we did last time. We just projected that. And I'm going to go and do something kind of similar to what you had, I think, but it's going to be just a little bit different. So if this is our sketch that we're going for, what I want to do is make a profile that kind of goes down the middle of it. So I'm going to open this back up, edit sketch, and then I'm only going to do half though. So that's another benefit of this method is you can just do half. And I'm going to extend it a little bit past kind of where I ultimately want to end up. And so that's kind of what I'm looking for. And then another thing I want to do, which I should have done a little differently here, is I want to make at least this part be straight so that I can mirror it pretty easily. So that's straight, and then I want to make sure that this line is also collinear so that everything hopefully works out right. And the end, collinear with that. And then I would also try to make, okay, I think that'll work. All right. And so now we have kind of a nice midline profile here. And so I'm going to say finish sketch, and then kind of similar to last time, we're going to make some profiles, except for this time we need to close them. So I'm going to kind of use that as a guide, but I'm not going to actually use those dots this time. And notice that I'm going below the profile. So what I'm essentially going to do is I'm going to make a loft, and I'm going to split it in half. So you essentially just want this to extend below this plane. So I'm going to split it along this plane, and just want to make sure that everything is under that so that we can have a nice flat surface. So that's our first one. Let's use our planes again from last time. Let's use this one. And then you can always project like we did before, but just to speed things up. It's kind of hard to sketch when you're on these kind of weird angles, but it is helpful to try and kind of see where your bottom line is so you can kind of make everything the same. But again, we're going to split that anyway, so it doesn't really matter as much. And again, this is not textbook at all. And try to make them, again, we can change them later, finish sketch. Okay, so we have a couple profiles. And then I'm going to do probably 2 more. Similar again, and we want to fade it down. Collinear. That's okay. We can move this over. So I'm not constraining everything because we're going to change it anyway. And then this one, I actually think we should go a little bit further. So I'm going to offset this even more. Okay, and so I think this should loft. Everything should intersect. We'll see what happens. Create loft here, and then, oops. All right, so our profile is this. Our guide, we're just going to use center line, and then we're going to add another profile, which will be that, and then that, and then that. Okay, and so this is pretty similar to what you had last time, it seems like. What is this? Let's see. Yes, we just need to modify that a little bit. Yes, that's a little better. Okay, and so now we have pretty much what you had, but what we wanted is basically this needs to be a little bit lower, because what we're going to do is split it, and what we're hoping is that when we split it, it splits where it's basically still descending. So we're going to come into this one and try to edit this. Where is that? Yes, we want this to be essentially as close to possible. It might not work if we're below. Okay. Yeah. So we want that to be pretty low down, even if we can, I don't know if it's going to work. Yeah. And so you can see here that this is cutting through that piece. So what we're about to do is split it. So split, select that, and then our splitting tool is just going to be the plane. Split body, splitting tool is our XY plane. And click OK. And so now, after all that, we have this body. And so you can still, modify it and move it around. The one thing that is hard to do is get the dimensions perfect on this, because you're basically, you're kind of guessing and then modifying it as you go. But I mean, this is fairly close to what, we had the last time, and it was a lot lower effort overall. So then all we have to do is do a mirror. So create mirror, flip it over. And then you can do some stuff to make this a little bit better, just in general. Or you could just make everything symmetric if you wanted to. So yeah, and then you can extrude this bottom part down. And so now you have like a full horseshoe looking thing, or buckle. And then let's see if we can make that part a little bit better. I bet part of it is, so my guideline, yeah, I wasn't sure if it had that selected. Okay, but you can make this scene a lot better than what is shown. But this is not a bad design, or a bad form. So you can just use fillets like you normally would. And now I want to show you the final way, which is kind of more basic and fairly straightforward. And this is probably the way I would do it, honestly, is basically do the same thing you've been doing, but we're just going to use the basic solid modeling stuff. So make this horizontal, vertical. I want to make sure that this is vertical. And the reason I do this is I just want the mirror to look good. All right, then we're just going to extrude it up a little bit. Mirror. Okay, and so that looks pretty basic, right? Well, what we're going to do to get that effect that you're looking for with the kind of tapering is you can go in and just basically cut everything off like this. And then I would just encapsulate it somehow. And now we can extrude. And so now we have this angle, and you can play with that angle. So for instance, if you wanted to make it a little more kind of interesting, you might use a spline, right? So we can go like that. You can make it curve even more if you wanted to. And then we're gonna use that to cut it off. And then we can use just a regular fillet here. Let's go constant. And so now we have, fairly basic, but doesn't look too bad design. And you can always just change that point if you don't like how that looks. You can come in here, make some changes. And then I know you mentioned you did the, I guess the place where the latch kind of goes. You just make a circle here, make it horizontal and vertical. And then all these are just random numbers. So I have no idea what the actual dimension should be. And these are not good design techniques, but maybe we can fillet this. So maybe I need to do this one. Yeah, so I mean, that's, I haven't spent a ton of time on it, but I think you get the gist of, a lot of times it's easier to try to kind of jerry rig a way up to do it. It's to kind of get the end result you're looking for than trying to use some of the more complicated things. So I know that's not perfect by any means, but you can also, come this way and then fill this back up. So again, that's another version of it that might work for you. So those are just some different ideas. I know that was a long kind of summary of different ways to do it, but I think if I was doing it, I would try my best to try to do it just with a side profile cut. And you can also revolve a profile. So if you wanted it to kind of curve in different directions, that's an option. So hopefully that's helpful for you. I think that that's probably all of the questions. So this is an old question. And then the 3D printer question, a couple people answered this. The Bamboo Lab, I think, is a great option. The A1 Mini is really cheap right now, so it's something that works good. It's pretty straightforward to use and is really affordable for what you get. So that's a good recommendation. I think a couple people kind of echoed that. I also still like the Prusa Mini and the Prusa like Mark III, especially because they're pretty cheap used relatively because they were pretty popular. And I think it's just good to learn kind of from what Prusa does with their prints and just how to make and work on the printers. So hopefully that makes sense. I know this is a long tutorial series, but just wanted to try to answer the questions the best I could, and hopefully it helps somebody. Thanks for watching.